Okay.
Thanks, Mel. Okay, so this afternoon what we're going to be talking about is creating a simple strategy for your nonprofit. A lot of the work that I do is with smaller organisations, but if you're really, even if you're a larger organisation and you're looking for a way just to create a simple strategy, this is really one method of showing you how you can do that. And as I've sort of said there in the subtext of the title slide, often strategies and strategic planning can be really overwhelming. And what we want to do is make sure it's not overwhelming us, but inspiring us. So there's a little bit more about me, but I think Mel gave me a great intro, so we probably don't need to talk any more about that. So I've just included this Chinese proverb here because I think what's really important for us to think about is what, last year was a very challenging year for many organisations. I do know a few organisations that actually really did quite well and thrived, but either way, it was a challenging year from many fronts. So this quote here is, "Be not afraid of growing slowly, be afraid of standing still." And I think it's really appropriate for us to think about at this time, because maybe for a lot of us last year we were just in a holding pattern and we weren't really trying to do too much in terms of moving forward. But now is really the time that we can shake off last year and really think about how we can move forward positively for our organisations. So today we'll share with you some of those tools and ways of doing that. And I think what's important is, obviously last year, so many of us probably had plans in place and they just got thrown out the window. So this session is really about getting just a brief plan. I sort of talk in this session about it being a 12-month plan. I think our world is in a place at the moment where it's very uncertain. We're really not sure of of how things are going to be going over the next 6 to 12 months and even further down the track. So creating longer term plans at this time might be a bit challenging. So even a 12-month plan, or we're in March, so even if you just create a plan for the rest of the year, that is always a great place to start. So what we'll be doing today is learning the basics so that you can develop your own simple strategic plan for your charity. And that will include looking at why a strategy is so important. I'm going to go through a bit of an easy to follow process that you can actually use to develop that plan for yourself. And then I've got a few examples from some small charities that I've worked with over the years, and to share some of their their strategic plans with you. So also to say thanks for everyone that has attended the presentation this afternoon. We've got a special offer, so I'll share that with you all at the end of the session as well. So first of all, why is strategic planning and, more importantly, strategic thinking important? So it's really important for your own clarity to be able to get your thoughts, especially if you're in an organisation where you're it's especially smaller organizations, often the founder or the general manager or CEO, someone that's leading the organization, is often the person that's doing all of this stuff as well. It might be a really small team. So you've got a lot of these ideas in your head and you really want to get them down onto paper or onto the computer, and really get people thinking about really being able to provide yourself with that clarity. If you have got others around you, and whether they're paid staff or, again, in smaller organisations, they are often volunteers, it helps you improve their performance because they actually understand the roadmap. They go, okay, well, I know where we're going now. I can see what we're trying to achieve, and it gives some confidence to the work that they're doing. As you know, people say that you need to plan for success. So that is a really important aspect of it. And it really also allows you to think about the social impact that you're having. At the end of the day, all of our organisations are here to create change in the world, and we are all doing that really, really well. So by having the ability to think strategically and do strategic planning, it allows us to make sure we're actually creating some real social impact. So it gets you thinking about those sorts of things, which is really good. And the last thing is that always is an opportunity to bring your stakeholders on the journey, especially if you're an organisation that has perhaps major donors or trusts and foundations that invest in you. It's a great way to share this sort of work with them so they can sort of see what you're planning as well. So, as we said earlier, sometimes the whole idea of strategic planning can be really overwhelming. This sort of tree, I think, is a really great example of it. It shows you all the different things you need to be thinking of when you're doing your plan, and you can be feeling like it's way too much. But what we're going to be doing today is just really making it simple and paring it right back so we know exactly where to start and not to be overwhelmed by it, but rather to be inspired. So first of all, the first tip I'd like to talk about is keeping it simple. Often when we think about any strategy document, whether it's a strategic plan or a fundraising strategy or a program strategy, often they can be really big documents. One thing that I've been doing for at least the last 10 years has really been about paring those documents back. A good strategy, whether it's, like I said, a fundraising strategy, a marketing strategy, whatever it is, or an organizational strategic plan, it doesn't need to be a mammoth document. I think sometimes what can happen is because you think it needs to be such this big, huge document, that does happen. It takes forever to do it. And then once it's done, nobody ever goes back and looks at it. So my preference for all of these types of strategic plans and strategy documents is just to keep them really simple. In terms of a strategic plan for your organisation, having a theory of change or market analysis and competitor analysis, they're great things to do, but we're not talking about that in today's webinar. And the reason I'm not talking about in this webinar is while they are good things to do, I think in this current environment, maybe just thinking about the real simple and basic elements of your strategic plan is the best way to move forward. And like I said earlier, we're only going to be looking at a sort of a smallish time frame to do the plan. Sorry, so I think that's really important. Like I said, if you do have a really big document, sometimes it just sits on a shelf or sits in a folder on your computer and it's not really opened once it's done. But if it's a brief document, it can be much more user-friendly and it will get used and referred to. And consequently, it's also easier to tweak and update over time and in the future years as well. One tool that I do like to use though, just to have a bit of a quick review of where you're at, is a SWOT analysis, which most of you've probably heard of, but I will touch on that in a little bit of detail now. So a SWOT analysis, as you know, is around talking about your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities and threats. What I've put in this presentation here, as you can see, is your strengths. It just gives you a couple of points to how you can think about. So your strengths are obviously things that you do well, and they're things that give you an advantage over other organisations. Your weaknesses are things that you lack or you need to do better. The opportunities are things that you can take advantage of, and the threats are the potential risks for your organisation. What's really important to think about as well is that your strengths and weaknesses are generally internal to your organisation, and your strengths you want to try and do more or leverage, and your weaknesses you want to invest in to try and turn that around. Your opportunities and your threats are external to your organisation. And I think the point around the internal and external is really an important one, because often people will sometimes get confused. They might think about a weakness and they'll think, oh, maybe that's a threat to our organisation. But it depends. If you've got some control over it and it's seen as an internal thing that you can change, that would be there. So for instance, an internal, a weakness for an organisation may be that you don't have skilled fundraising staff, for instance, or a skilled fundraising person in your organisation. That wouldn't be a threat because it's internal. It's something you can control. You can invest in it. You can change it. You know, you can learn from it. Changes to government policy, though, that's something that you could have as a threat, because that is something that you cannot control. So hopefully that provides some insights there in the way I like to think about it. And I guess what's important is you think about, where do you find it, and what do you do? They're the questions, I guess, that you sort of want to ask. So what we really want to be able to do when we're creating a strategic plan is make a roadmap that works for you. That's what's really important. And that's what we're going to step you through now. Mel, I'm not sure if some questions have been coming in.
There are. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I will for this one. Mary is asking, how often should you run a SWOT analysis?
I would probably only run a SWOT analysis. Well, you could do it every year, but generally you would do one when you do a strategic plan. So often organisations do 2 to 3 year strategic plans, but I would do one definitely every time you do it, and maybe you can update that every 12 months. You can do again, my background's in fundraising, so I do talk a bit about fundraising, and it's obviously a large part of nonprofit work, but sometimes you can do an organisational SWOT analysis, and then one specifically around the fundraising area as well, that I sometimes put those in a fundraising strategy document. But definitely once a year, I think, is plenty.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much. That is all of the questions so far.
So the first part in terms of planning your roadmap for your organisation's strategic plan is to think about the essence of your organisation. What's at the heart of what you do? And there's 4 elements to this, what's your essence part. And the icons that you can see on the screen is sort of how I've represented it, which hopefully may stick in some of your minds as you move away. Of course, you'll get the slide deck anyway, but it's a really good way to try and remember how it's easier to lay it out. So one of the first elements of your essence is the vision of your organisation. So what does your nonprofit's ideal future look like? Obviously, it should be something that's inspirational. It should be something that is a shared belief. And it's also a shared belief not only within people in your organisation and the beneficiaries that you work with, but that's your organisation vision is often what people buy into, your supporters and your donors. They buy into that ideal future that you see. So it's really important to spend time in getting your vision right. Vision, mission and values are going to be touched on now, but they're also things that I can probably do a whole nother workshop on, which I do sometimes. But that's not really what this is. And I talk about this in a moment, because I don't want to happen, I don't want someone to start doing the strategic plan and get stuck at the vision going, oh, is our vision right? Maybe I need to change it. Maybe we should spend some time on that. If that's what you think you need to do, that's fine. Jot that down, put it aside, make time to do it a little bit in the future. But I would still suggest you progress with the actual strategic plan. The reason why we put these things around your essence at the start of a strategic plan is because it really shapes then and gives you that footing, I guess, for the type of work that you do and who you are as an organisation. A really good vision is often brief and concise as well. So I've got 2 examples there. Obviously, one is a world without Alzheimer's disease. That's obviously from an Alzheimer's support organisation or a research organisation. And then the second one is all young people have equal opportunities to succeed. So they're 2 examples of 2 different nonprofits' ideal future for their organisation. You guessed it, the next part of your organisation's essence is your mission. So again, what is the reason that you exist? This is really, really important. So this is quite different to your mission. Your mission is about how you see things to be. The vision is about how you see things to be. The mission is about why you're doing things and what you're doing now. Generally, I would always suggest 1 sentence. If you have to have 2, that's fine. It shouldn't be a paragraph. And ideally, we want it written as an active statement, that we do this or we do that, or however it sort of comes out, but not a passive statement in how I'm talking there. This is the point that I just made before. Again, not being critical or worrying about that. If you do think you need to change your vision and your mission, just put it aside and continue on with your plan for now. The next part of your essence is something that's really important to all organisations, and I think we are really good in the nonprofit sector in having values, identifying values, and trying our best to work within those values and around those values. Some organisations do it a lot better than others, but I think nonprofits as a whole generally do it quite well. So I think what's important here to think about in terms of your values is what is most important to your nonprofit, what attributes would you not compromise, and what guides your decision making. I'm on the board of a small international development organisation, and I actually share share their strategic plan a bit later as one of my examples. But you know, we have guiding principles, so we don't have values as such. They're called guiding principles, but it's kind of the same thing. And I've probably not known an organisation, and they were doing this before I started, so it wasn't my influence. But I've not known an organisation that really, not personally known of an organisation that really lives and breathes its values as much as this organisation. You know, at board meetings, often, at every board meeting, often we're discussing an issue or discussing something that we need to make a decision on, and someone will bring into it the conversation around one of our particular values or guiding principles. So I think that's really important. So you need to be really clear about what those values are. And again, that's what your donors and your supporters and the people around you have those shared values too. And the next part of your essence is, who do you serve? So who are your beneficiaries? It's really important that you can articulate this in a relatively simple way. Often it's a cohort of people or a cohort of the population, in a specific group. Sometimes it could be the animals or a type of animal or the environment, and that's okay. Obviously, it's not always about people as beneficiaries, but it's really important that you can articulate that and put that into your strategic plan. And I think the reason why it's good, like I said, to get these things in there early is so you can start to think about who you are as an organisation, and it just really gets you, I guess, in the right space to be able to think about strategically about your organisation and what you want to achieve. So the next part of your strategic plan is where I think the real work actually starts to happen. That first essence part is something that you probably already have documented somewhere. You're not actually doing the work around that. But this is where, in the middle section of your strategic plan, is really where the work starts to happen. And there's 3 key areas here. There's your strategic priorities, your objectives, and your key performance indicators. And I'm going to talk you through each of those now. So first of all is your strategic priorities. So what you need to think about here are 2 to 5, and I really would advise you not to have more than 5. I really did have 2 to 3 written there, but I extended it a little. But you don't want to do any more than 5. Areas that you want to work over the next 12 months. Again, you can use this principle if you're creating a strategic plan for the next 2 or 3 years as well. But again, I wouldn't go much above 5. So these are the key areas. Like, this is thinking really top level stuff. You're not going into any detail. It's thinking about those strategic priorities for your organisation. As that dot point there says, it's usually something about your actual work, your program delivery, or your services. Sometimes there would be a strategic priority around infrastructure or your resourcing. So sometimes there's a strategic priority around fundraising or financial sustainability or marketing, brand awareness, something like that. But I think that's really important for you to have a think about those top things, those top level things, what you might want to do. Was there a question then, Mel?
Yeah, someone was just trying to clarify if that means that you were talking about acquiring corporate donors as well.
In terms of the strategic priorities.
You know what? I'm not too sure. Kevin, would you mind clarifying your question, please? Just as a strategic priority. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So you probably wouldn't have necessarily to obtain more corporate partners as a strategic priority in itself, because that's quite a tactical thing. It's quite operational. The overarching strategic priority for that might be, it might be something around ensuring the financial sustainability of our organisation for the next 5 years. And then this next part that we go into, one of your objectives or some of the tasks might be around corporate partners, if that's one of the ways you're going to help achieve that strategic priorities. Was it Kevin? I think you said Mel. So Kevin, if you just let's go through the next few slides and see if that sinks, like if it all makes sense, if I go through it, and then if not, just shout out again and we can revisit it.
Thanks, Bianca. So and Kevin does say that does make sense. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All good.
I wish I could see everybody's faces and we could all just talk like normal, but this is still good. It's just, this is one of the challenges, I think, of the virtual world.
Of course.
But yeah, I like everyone to interact as much as possible. So feel free to ask any questions. I don't want, the worst thing for me is that everyone leaves a webinar and thinks that it was a waste of their time and they didn't get anything out of it, because then it means it's a waste of everybody's time. So I want you to make sure you're learning something. So ask questions as much as you like. And my dad always taught me the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So I think I've always had that advice since I was like 4. So I probably asked too many questions. But anyway, so ask away. So the next part after you do your strategic priorities is you think about what do you need to do to achieve those strategic priorities. And then we have a layer called our objectives. So then what you would be doing is you're putting 1 to 4 objectives under each of those strategic priorities. These are really what we call the building blocks of your strategy. So again, thinking about if the strategic pillar was to ensure financial sustainability or to increase the ability for financial sustainability, we might have 3 objectives under that. One of that might be build corporate partnerships, multi-year corporate partnerships it might be. So that's quite detailed, but that's sort of saying, okay, we might get corporate partners over 2 to 3 years, rather than just getting a $500 donation from a business here and a $100 donation there. We might actually work really hard because that helps us with that sustainability aspect. It becomes, when you talk about financial sustainability, you're talking more than just fundraising. Obviously, you're talking over a period of time. Just checking the time as well. So these objectives are really important. You've probably all heard of the SMART principles in terms of your objectives. So I just quickly drop them up here. But wherever you can, it's really important to be specific, measurable, try and make them attainable or achievable, relevant, and have a time frame on them as well. Often when you're doing a strategic plan and it's a 12-month period or whatever period, that's obviously your time thing. So if each objective doesn't have a time written in it, it kind of makes sense, because you're talking about a defined time period for the overall plan. And the third part, I guess, of that really bulky part of your strategic plan are your key performance indicators. So these sit underneath your goals. So this is where you start to talk about, okay, how are we going to know if we've been successful? What things will you measure? And what are some of the changes that you would actually like to see? So what you might like to think about, for instance, if we go back to the financial sustainability example, so the strategic pillar is to build our financial sustainability over the next 3 to 5 years. One of the objectives was around corporate partnerships, building and developing 2 to 3 multi-year corporate partnerships. One of the KPIs may be that by the end of this year, we may have 5 relationships and building, because the trick with corporate partnerships, remember, is they do take a little bit of time. You need to build those relationships. So if we were starting on a really flat base that didn't have many relationships, by the end of the year we want to have 5 strong relationships. We maybe want to have developed one of those relationships into a partnership, or at least in the progress of actually finalizing that partnership with a potential, $20,000 per year over 3 years. That could be the key performance indicator there. So it's a little bit hard to talk about them without the specifics of it all, but we've got some examples in a minute that I'm going to show you as well. So we're going to go through some of these really great examples. Was there another question, Mel, before I go through the examples?
Yes, a really great question from Mary. How many KPIs should you measure on average for an organization? And should you stick measuring just fundraising metrics, or could you measure things for impact, fundraising, volunteering, or would that get too confusing or hard to track?
What was that person's name, Mel?
Mary.
Mary, thanks, Mary. That is a very, very good question. I like your thinking. My answer is, if we go back, what I would say is you want to have at least a couple of KPIs, not necessarily for every objective. I don't think if it's not relevant, because some of your objectives may be meeting that same sort of goal. They may just be a different area. But what you would want to definitely do is have a few at least for your strategic priorities. So if you've got 4 strategic priorities, you probably end up having, 6 to 8 KPIs. Having said that, there's no hard and fast rule. I definitely am one for not overcomplicating things, like you've mentioned, but I don't think they all need to be around fundraising. So, if one of your strategic priorities down this bottom one here was around your resourcing, so we want to develop the team and employ, develop the team and employ a new administration person, or something like that. That's actually, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be your strategic priorities. Your strategic priorities would be higher level. So it would be develop the team to ensure we can deliver on our programs, right? So then one of your objectives around that might be around ensuring that everyone has a performance plan and there's a budget for professional development. So you may have one KPI that just meets all of that. So obviously that KPI is not going to have anything to do with fundraising or fundraising metrics. So if there are fundraising strategic priorities in there, definitely have some fundraising KPIs, but not all your KPIs, or what I'm saying, need to be about dollars. No, and to be honest, all your fundraising KPIs don't need to be about dollars. If you've got something in there about bequests or gifts and wills, most of the time you wouldn't have KPIs around dollars, because with a corporate partnership, sure, you can have some say in, we want $20,000 a year for the next 3 years, but you don't have that sort of choice around bequests, and you also have no idea on the timing. So if you did have bequests, a KPI around a bequests thing might be, that we've developed a pipeline and that we've got 20 people that have indicated they're going to leave us a bequest, and we have a morning tea with them twice a year, or whatever it might be. So they're more around your activities in terms of dollars. So hopefully that's answered that question, Mary. Thank you. So on to some of these great examples. So this first one is from an organisation called St Kilda Gatehouse. So I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. I know we've got people from a few different places. So this organisation is based in St Kilda in Melbourne. I'm sure you're all familiar with the seaside suburb of St Kilda. So St Kilda Gatehouse is an organisation that works with primarily, they do a few different things, but they work primarily with street sex workers for their safety and ensuring their well-being. A lot of these women that they work, primarily women, but a lot of the women that they serve have drug and alcohol issues, homelessness issues, things like that they're working with them. So this was from their strategic plan. So they had 4 strategic directions, as you can see. The first one was to serve, so that was around their quality, that was around their services, sorry. The second one was around connecting with the partners. The third one was around building their brand awareness. And the fourth one was around sustainability. So then what we can do is, I've shared, they basically had this as a document, so I've just shared that first page and then a summary of each of their pages. So as you can see, serve was their first strategic priorities, then, or their strategic direction, I think they call them. Then they have down here 3 aims. So this is a little bit different to something, but these could also be seen as the objectives or the aims, you know. So for this particular piece, they are going to be creating consistency across all of their services, continue to build a model of service excellence, and strengthen support within, across, and outside the organisation. And then this, what we will see, this is basically their KPIs. They've just used some different language. And as you'll see from the few examples that I'm going to show you now, each organisation does use different language, and it's completely fine. You can use what suits you. Some people are like, oh, I hate the word goals, or I hate the word objectives. That's fine. Just make it suit your organisation, the tone of your organisation as well. So then their second strategic direction was around connecting and building stronger partnerships, and their 3 aims were strengthen the support for the organisation, access a wider range of service options, and integrate the organisation into other organisations' plans. And then they've got a few KPIs around that. What you do need to remember as well is the strategic plan is at this high level. So this doesn't tell us the detail. Obviously, after you have a strategic plan, you would then develop certain other plans. So whether it's a fundraising plan that spins off it, or whether it's a programs and services plan, or depending on your organisation, but you would have something else around, you know, your delivery of the impact and the work that you do. Then they also have their third strategic direction around promotion. They've got 3 aims there, and then a few KPIs. And as you can see, and this one here is around thriving. So this is their sustainable future. So they've only got 2 strategic directions here, but they're quite broad. I mean, they've only got 2 aims here, sorry. The first one's create long-term financial sustainability. And the second one is develop new opportunities for income growth and diversity. They haven't got anything in here about the dollars. There's no dollar figure in there at all. So it's quite broad from this perspective. But what this does as well is, as someone who, like I said, works primarily in the fundraising space, as if I was to create a fundraising plan for this organisation, I can now come to this part of this thing, and these last 2 are probably mostly related to a fundraising plan. Build more public awareness of the work. That particular strategic direction aim there is important, and these 2 here are really important. But knowing what the organisation's strategic direction is in that area really helps me then nettle down into the fundraising plan, and starts helping me think about what fundraising activities we would choose, what plans we might choose, what, you know, if you want to build long-term financial sustainability, like I said before about that corporate partnership, you want to try and get multi-year partnerships. If you can get $5,000 from someone, you might ask them, would they mind committing 5,000 for 2 years? Because that then just takes some of the pressure off. You know, you then have 24 months to work out what's happening after that period, and that's where that sustainability starts to come in. Grants, you know, philanthropic trusts and foundations and grants are really good for longer term financial sustainability. So some of what you have in your strategic plan really can help direct some of the other work that you're going to start doing in your organisation. This is another organisation that I've done work with. They're called Foyer Foundation. So they are based here in Australia. I think you have some foyers in Canada as well. They're very strong in Britain, but basically youth foyers are housing, or not housing, they're homes effectively for young people that are experiencing homelessness, and they tie in their ability to live there. They have a 2-year plan, and they go to school or finish a TAFE course or do training for jobs during that 2 years. So it's very much tied into education and employment, or helping really. So they're not just like a homeless youth shelter at all. They're very much homes. So the Foyer Foundation is the Australian organisation that sort of oversees all of the foyers in Australia. So what's really exciting about their strategy is this is it. This is one page. They do have a bigger document that sort of sits behind it, but in all honesty, this is what they share on their website, and this is what they share with their donors, and this is the things that they report back to people on as well. So as you can see, they've put their vision there, they've put their values, they've just used icons for their values. They haven't even really gone into detail here. Like I said, they do in another document, but here it's just pretty short and snappy. And then for their then on the right hand side there, they've got their purpose at the top. So their purpose is to promote the Foyer approach for the benefit of young Australians. And then they've got their 3 strategic pillars, is what they call them: influence, quality, and capacity. And then they've got an objective underneath, or some more detail underneath, and then all of their objectives below that. So if we just pick up on that quality one in the middle, that is around leading a national agenda that ensures fidelity to the Foyer approach. So the Foyer approach is a trademarked method in supporting young people out of homelessness. So that's what they mean when they say that. And then there's 3 objectives around that. And the first one is establish a transparent accreditation mechanism for application to new and existing Foyers. Drive national standards improvement through the national community of practice, and protect and enhance the brands of Foyer Foundation, accredited Foyers, and Advantage Thinking. So that's really quite clear. Like I said, it's really quite short and snappy. I don't suggest everyone tries their hardest to get a strategy on a page, because that can actually sometimes be harder. But it is really nice to know that you can do it. So even if your strategy ends up being 5 pages and you think, look, we're just going to put the short bit of it and that's what we'll share on our website with our wider supporter group, then that's always a great idea to do. Were there a few questions had come in, Mel?
Just some chatter amongst everyone in the chat.
That's okay. Sorry about that. I can just see the flashes. I can't see the chat, so I just thought I'd check in.
Philip does say that looks beautiful, captures everything perfectly.
People
are excited about the Foyer Foundation example. So
yeah, great. Thank you. It is a good one, that one. And this is Indigo Foundation. So this is the organisation that I'm on the board of. And this was the main part that I've taken out of it. It was a bigger document. So these are 2 pages that have come out of that. That's why it's also squishy on that page for you. But as you can see, they've got their strategic direction, building on strong foundations, and they've got 3 goals that they have, and then they talk about each, they talk about different things under each of those goals. So if we look at the first one, so goal 1 is around expanding the impact of our work in communities while retaining our commitment to being a principles-driven, relationships-based development organisation. And the actions, again, this can kind of sit as objectives, is that the first one, for example, we won't go through all of them, is stay invested in a small number of communities, support their efforts to achieve sustainable changes over time, and replicate what is working through local partners and within neighbouring or like-minded communities where appropriate. So this is one that's got a little bit more detail to it, but again, it's not impossible. It's just another way of showing you know, how it can be done, because this still is quite a simple strategy. The whole document, and if you're interested, you can go to Indigo Foundation's website, you can get the whole thing. It's not a huge document. I think I want to say it's 8 pages, but maybe it's 10, but it's not really that huge. So it may not even be that, it might be 8 pages. So this is great. Having a 1-page snapshot's really cool, but you don't have to feel the pressure of doing that, is part of it. And this one, like I said, that was 5 pages that I shared you. There were a few other pages in that document as well. You won't find this one on their website anymore, because that was an old one, which I have shared with their permission as well. All of these have given permission to share that. So in terms of what's next, so you've developed your strategic plan. I think what's really important is to then think about your operational plan. Again, don't be too overwhelmed by it. An operational plan could be even more simple. What the operational plan means is, how are you going to implement it? So what things are we going to do? So it might include some program planning or marketing and fundraising plans or whatever else it might be. Then what's really important to do is actually to communicate your strategic plan with your stakeholders. And again, in this current environment, even if it is a 9 or 12-month plan just for the rest of the year, I think it's really important. I mean, it's a big lot of work. Doesn't have to be an overwhelming piece of work though, but it takes a bit of thinking, and it's really good, really great tool to use to create excitement and to get people again buying in on that those shared values and vision of your organisation. Share it with your supporters as well, and of course, don't forget your team. And again, team doesn't always mean just your paid staff. You want to make sure your paid staff and your volunteers know about your strategy before they, read it on your website or they see the general email. So I think I probably should have this in a slightly different order. So I think your team would probably be first, then your stakeholders. So that might be, corporate partners or philanthropic trusts and foundations or major donors, and then your supporters more generally as well. So the last little thing that I wanted to share here was a quote that was from C.S. Lewis that said, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." And I've just taken the liberty, which I don't know if I'm allowed to do that over C.S. Lewis, but you are never too late to set another goal or to dream a new dream. So don't worry that we're in March. The other thing is you could do one if you're a bit systematic. You could do a new plan for the new financial year if you want to, and you've got a couple of months to sort that out. Or you could sometimes I do 18-month plans as well. But it's up to you. Don't be too overwhelmed by the timing of things. And if you've never done one, don't worry about that either. Just it's never too late to get that started. So I've got some time for question and answers. And while I'm waiting for Mel to pop in with them, I just thought I'd quickly mention the Small Nonprofit Alliance, that organisation that I'm part of. So we're basically an online community for small charities. We have two types of memberships. Our basic membership is free. So it's for those small charities that are on a really tight budget. They can still get some access to some of our resources. And then we have advanced membership as well. There's some information here around some of the things we do. We do a lot of webinars. We have a lot of resources developed specifically for small charities, PDF downloads, cheat sheets, that sort of stuff. And we've got a number of service discounts with our partners as well. And we have a private Facebook group which is growing, which we call our Members Lounge. And that's really good because one thing we find with people in small charities is really hard for them to connect with others. They feel a bit isolated sometimes. So that's an exciting thing. We've got a special offer. So for everyone that was able to join us today, it's 20% off our annual membership. So advanced membership drops down. This is only valid for 48 hours though. You just have to use the code BOUNCE20. And there's a link that you probably can't click on because it's on my screen, but I'll put that in the chat box for you all as well.
Awesome.
And that's it, I think.
Thank you so much. That's an awesome offer for the attendees. We will be sharing the recording tomorrow, so the 48 hours should still be able to
so if anyone watches it, anyone
exactly.
But it's also just a special gift for the people that were able to make it here with us today as well.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. That was honestly such valuable information that you just shared with us all. I know there's been a ton of questions that came kind of throughout, and there's also a few questions that came in out. So everyone seems really engaged. So thank you so much, Bianca.
No worries.
Okay, so the first question, where on the website should the plan live? Is the about page good enough, or is there somewhere else that they should be putting this?
It does depend on the organisation, I think. An about area is good, but if you have a resources or some websites have a news and publication section. So, where you might put your annual reports and things like that. I think just in there is fine. But the other thing is, remember that people often don't necessarily just go to your website to get it. So you're going to have to push people there. So you might share it on your Facebook page and then put the link to it. Or you might also do that through an e-newsletter as well. But yeah, I think probably in an About Us section, if your website is quite simple, it's probably good. but otherwise in a news or publication space as well, wherever you put your newsletters and your annual reports.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Next question. Do you have tips on how to communicate the plan to board members?
Okay, this is interesting. I think what's really important is the board members should be involved in the plan process some point in some way. I can probably feel people go, oh, that's really hard at the moment. Some boards are easier to work with than others. I'm aware of that. But really, because it's about the strategic direction of your organisation, it's not like a fundraising strategy or a program strategy. It's not operational. It's not purely operational. I think it's important to have them involved. So I think letting them know that this is what you're going to be doing. Maybe you go to them one meeting with the outline of what you're thinking, or with some strategic pillars or those strategic directions if you've got that. The other thing is, if you've never had a strategy before your organisation, it's really important that you get them on board as well. So I think hopefully your board meets monthly, so you can sort of talk to them about it at one point. But if they're not meeting for another 2 months and you want to get started, I'd really suggest sending out an email as a first point of call, saying that you're going to be getting on top of doing one, and maybe just outlining some of those top level things and seeing what their thoughts are and getting their buy-in that way. But then outside that, once it's done, I would definitely be presenting it with the board, like actually in person, or in person if you have in-person board meetings at the moment, where if it's on Zoom, that's fine as well. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, those are some great tips. Thank you. Another question coming from Brandon. We're a really small team who've been pretty distracted with COVID and lost a lot of our senior staff. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that one. Where do you recommend starting on building a new strategy with a new team and scaled back services?
Brandon, that's tough. I'm really sorry to hear about how much your organisation has been affected by COVID. But it's really great that you've firstly made time to come to a session like this. I think that's really good, because sometimes we can get so busy in our organisations that we don't bring our heads up, and that can also become a problem because we just get so buried down in all the detail and feel a bit like a hamster in a wheel. So it's good to get out of that. So well done for you. Well done to you for that. I think the best place to start is really just not pretend, you don't have to pretend, it kind of is, but it's kind of a little bit exciting. It's like a blank slate, or a clean slate, I think they say. So I think it's really important that you keep that in mind. If you have got some new people that have come on board, I think you said, maybe even have a session, and it doesn't have to be an all-day strategy planning session. It could just be a 1-hour session. If you're in, the senior position, perhaps you come up with those top pillars, and bring that to the team. So bring some of those ideas to the team and get everybody talking about that. To be honest, if you're a new person to a team and you're being brought in on some strategy planning, that's a really good way for people to really start to feel connected with your organisation as well. So it could be used as a really great team building experience for them as well. And in regards to, I think you mentioned scaled back services, in regards to having scaled back services, that's okay. I think if your organisation has scaled things back, it might be that there's something in the document that says, in 12 months, you review the scaled back services to see if you can, continue bringing any of them back in again. And that's part of the reason why I think doing a 12-month plan or thereabouts is really good, because things changed really quickly last year. And I think it's probably, I've spoken to a few people about this. I think it probably won't be for a few years. When we're out of all of this, we'll all be sitting back saying, wow, that was crazy. I mean, I know we know it's crazy, but I think we're still in a bit of that craziness. So when we get a chance to move forward, we'll be able to see that. So I think by doing shorter term plans is really good, because then you have had some space for some strategic thinking, and try not to worry about too much about it being a scaled back service, or, that you don't have as many team members as you previously have had. I think it's really just important about trying to make it achievable. So really, maybe don't have any more than 3 strategic pillars and just have a couple of objectives under each of them. You know, it's better to have a simpler plan and way forward and bring everybody on and be successful at that than trying to achieve too much and everyone's always feeling like, oh, we haven't really done anything because we haven't done half the stuff that we said we were going to do. You know, you want to make it a little bit inspirational as well, but you don't want to have people feeling like they're burnt out in trying to create, you know, trying to make that strategy happen. And I think that's, you know, a big risk for a lot of organizations, especially coming out of last year. So hopefully that answers your question, Brandon.
Thank you, Bianca. That was honestly really great. We do have a couple more questions. I think we might have time for both of them, actually.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Lara is asking, should I include risk assessment strategies in my plan as well, or is that too much?
You can. I wouldn't say that you couldn't do that. I think it's definitely up to people to include what they want to include.
Mm-hmm.
I would do that early on, you know, but interestingly, some of the risk assessment stuff could come into your SWOT analysis, you know, because if you think there are some risks, then they're either a risk because there's a weakness or there's a risk because there's a threat, you know. So you could summarize a risk analysis type thing in your SWOT, which would be a simple way to do it. But if you feel that your organization is the type of organization that would really need that in the document, then sure, I would include it. I wouldn't be against including it if that's what is the better thing for you.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes complete sense. And lastly, do you have any strategic plan templates that you're able to share with the audience, or have any kind of resources that you can direct them to?
Yes, we have something. I'm just trying to think. I don't think it's actually a template. I think what it on our website, the Small Nonprofit Alliance, we do have a basic. I think if you're a basic member, you've got access to it. So you can even join as a free member. That we do have a template in there. It really just steps through all of the aspects that we sort of did today. So the way I've talked about things today, the way I try to present this webinar or this presentation was so that it could be used as your template. So if you set it up, you know, with your organizational, you know, about us, or the organizational aspects at the start, which is your vision, your mission, your values, all of those things, and then you go into those other headings, it really can just be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be any detail, because you could see those examples that I showed you, that they can all present quite differently. And then if you want to have it designed or not, it's up to you again, and up to budget and costs and all that sort of stuff. Having a Word document is completely fine. But what I might do is I'll see where that resource is, Mel, and I can maybe email it to you, and maybe you can even just send it out with the webinar. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be great if you could.
Yeah, it's
but
not,
it makes
I know
sense too. That like,
yeah, I know it's not a full. Yeah, I know it's not a full template, but only because I sometimes think with something like this, having a full template, people get a bit overwhelmed if their things don't fit into it. So, but using this presentation and the headings that I've done, like once you get this slide deck, you'll be able to see all the things, and you should be able to work through with that. I was just trying to find the chat myself so I could put the link in there. So let me see if this is going to work. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so I think that's there. So that's the link that you can go to if you did want to get our, well, you can go there to join as our basic member, which is free, like I said, or to get the 20% discount, you just use the code BOUNCE 20, like that is the code. And that's it, I think, unless anyone's got anything else.
I think that's it for questions. And